What are your night shift horror stories? Hey people of Reddit, ever had those creepy moments when the clock strikes midnight and things get weird? Well, hold on to your seats because we got some seriously spooky Reddit stories coming your way. Before we dive to the first story, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Number 15. Used to work night shift at a 24-hour Walmart. Customers are nuts enough in the daytime, but they become weird after midnight. Once had an elderly guy came in wearing only a jean jacket and fishnet stockings. He came up to my register, leaned in, and asked if we carried anything to get rid of lice. Are those plastic barriers all stores have now to protect cashiers? They need to keep those even after the pandemic ends. I lost count of the times customers got into my personal space to ask about products for fleas, lice, rashes, etc. Number 14. Worked at parking garage at the airport. Cleaning the top deck and noticed about 100 ravens all over a truck with a tarp over the bed. Took my flashlight expecting something awful. Noticed as I got closer the smell and the ravens taking turns going in a hole they had torn open and popping out, covered in gunk. Some guy left a broke-down beater with a couple animal carcasses in the back to rot. No heads. Checked the logs and the damn truck had been there since November, and it was April, so everything was just thawing and breaking down. Number 13. Was walking through the simulation lab for nursing students at the hospital I work at on very little sleep. All the lights were off and it was my first time working night shift. Turned a corner and saw what I thought was a person standing behind a lamp that was on. Turns out it was a mannequin holding the pull cord. Really freaked me out and I was awake after that. Number 12. I worked in an open quarry mine down in Texas. We had this storm where it rained like a motherfucker for hours and hours. Being night shift, 6:30 p.m. 6:30 a.m. supervisor, I was in charge of 8 CAT 745 haul trucks, 2 CAT 390 excavators, 6 CAT 980 loaders, 2 D8 dozers, and 1 D9 dozer. It was about 2 a.m. when I had 3 haul trucks get stuck in the bottom of the mine, just spinning their tires endlessly. It was horrible. Since we're talking about tens of thousands of dollars of production per shift, I had to get permission to shut the mine down from the superintendent and relay that to the supervisors up in the plant that washes/dries the material, frac sand. They wouldn't shut down because I said so. I called him at minimum 13 times within an hour to get him to shut the mine down. Since it was 2 a.m., he never answered, which never happened as he always had his phone on. 3 to 4 of us were soaking wet and covered from head to toe in mud to the point where you couldn't even tell we were wearing neon green high-vis safety gear. We got the trucks pulled out of the mine after roughly 3 hours of using a combo of the dozers and loaders and excavators to essentially build a new road from drier materials. The superintendent got in at 6 a.m. for the 6:30 and 6:30 p.m. shift, took one look at the mine, and shut it down for the day. Turns out his phone charger came unplugged and his phone died in the middle of the night. Never knew I called. Number 11. I was once staying late doing some scenic painting in a college campus theater. It was late, pitch black dark outside and very quiet in the building. A few of us were up on the stage, not really talking, just taking care of business, when suddenly I saw out of the corner of my eye something go very quickly by the open door to the lobby. What the at? Then it went by again and I actually saw what it was. A guy with long hair wearing pajamas and no socks or shoes. He was tiptoeing in a very exaggerated way, pulling his knees up very high and grinning. What the at? It sounds kind of funny, but it was creepy as hell. We all made eye contact and one of the other painters was just about to go shut the door when the dude walked right in. He stood there staring at us for a full minute. You could have heard a pin drop. He threw his arms out to the sides dramatically and said, "I am your savior, Jesus Christ." No one responded and he eventually walked out. I guess he was hoping to get more of a reaction. The door was promptly shut and locked behind him and security called. They were not impressed. Turns out that he was a patient at some sort of group home nearby and had done this multiple times. I still get creeped out to this date if I'm working in a theater at night though. Number 10. Worked at a distress center almost 10 years ago. Was on the 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. Got about 2 phone calls each hour of the shift from the same guy saying that he's tied up in a room, his balls are tied up with leather straps, and his wife is getting banged by 5 giant black guys in the other room. Asked him each time if he's in distress, and he says no every time. Kept telling him if he's not in distress, then he shouldn't be calling and let him go. I just can't believe he was up from 12 to 6 a.m. to make those calls. Number 9. I was working the Christmas Eve night shift in my local emergency department. The clock struck 4 a.m. on Christmas morning, and the emergency buzzer sounded. A 74-year-old male patient had gone into a sudden cardiac arrest. The buzzer wasn't working properly, so we couldn't locate where exactly in the department it was coming from. Once we finally figured it out, we got in there, and I took over chest compressions. A team of anesthetists, nurses, doctors, and 20 minutes later, we managed to get him back for just long enough for his family to come and say goodbye to him. What a shit Christmas. Number 8. Not mine, but I used to work at a small hotel, and the manager there told me a terrifying night shift story. It was about midnight when she got a call at the front desk from a man. He said that he's with his 8-year-old daughter who dances competitively and needed advice on what she should wear. She gave him some basic fashion advice. He'd asked my manager, "What about fishnet leggings? Do you think those are too sexy?" Then proceeds to talk in graphic detail about how he thinks his own daughter has been trying to seduce him for weeks and how he's starting to enjoy seeing her dance in these cute outfits. Meanwhile, my manager is looking through a computer system trying to figure out who this man is so she can call the cops. However, the room he was reportedly in was empty. The man ends up hanging the phone up before she could find out where he was truly calling from. A couple months later, at around 11 p.m., my manager answers the desk phone. A familiar voice asked her if she could help him pick out an outfit for his daughter's next dance recital. She asked him, "Let me guess you want to know if she should wear fishnet leggings?" The man immediately hangs up the phone. Number 7. Work night shift at a large grocery store, one that wasn't open overnight, but had a skeleton crew to work the loads and do prep and clean. I worked near the entrance, large glass doors, but visually blocked off from my vantage point. Around 3 a.m., I heard knocking on the doors. This isn't completely uncalled for. Usually it's someone coming in for an early shift, but didn't have a key card. Sometimes it's someone's food delivery, or sometimes a customer who thinks we are open despite clearly being closed. I approach the door. It's a man that I don't recognize, wet from the rain. He looks normal enough, but something about him unnerved me. He had that vibe to him. You know, the one where it seems like maybe they're on their way to becoming a full-blown meth head, but for now they still manage to give the appearance of functionality. He was holding his shit together just enough to appear normal, but the edges were definitely shaky. Anyway, without unlocking the door, I announced that the store was closed. He told me that he just needed my help. His car had broken down in the parking lot, and he needed a boost. I didn't drive, so I told him I couldn't help him. I should have walked away there, but he was out in the rain and I did legitimately feel bad, so I told him I would see if any one of our few crew to drive. I did find someone who was willing to help, and got the night crew manager involved as well. We went out. Turns out he was parked a bit off from the entrance, in a fairly secluded spot, and he had a lady with him. There was a similar vibe with her. Almost but not exactly normal. It didn't click right away, but I figured they had been hooking up in the car in the parking lot, maybe left the radio or lights on and drained the battery. To me, that explained the weird unnerving feeling. They either felt ashamed or guilty, and it was showing through. Anyway, my coworker goes over to help give them a boost. The manager and I stay out there with him, nearby, watching. The two lovebirds kept peeking over at us a bit uncomfortably. After a few moments, the coworker returns from the car and hurries us back inside. We don't see them drive off, which seems odd. We get inside, lock up again, and then the coworker thanks us for staying out there with him and not leaving him alone with them. He'd also caught on to the unnerving air about them, and it made him worried. What worried him more was when it also turned out that there was nothing wrong with their car. Number 6. I work in a residential treatment center for teen girls. One girl with some severe trauma, abuse, came sleepwalking into the room screaming to please and tear her while clawing at her wrists. She was begging me to help her because
he's torturing me.
I sat her down and pulled her bracelets and watch off. She went completely limp, then got up and went back to bed. It freaked me out seeing the raw emotion of her trauma since she was always smiling and relatively calm during the day. Another time I was doing my nightly checks and a guy suddenly walked out from behind the door coming at me. I screamed and threw my flashlight at him. It was a smiley face balloon. Number 5. Many years ago, I worked at a regional radio station in the middle of nowhere, Australia. I was the overnight operator. Keep the overnight playlist running, set up for the morning, do all the manual checks for the next day, and jump on the desk if anything funky happens. I spent a lot of time sitting in what was essentially a tin shed in the middle of a paddock, with my dog, shoes off, listening to 50s and 60s music and doing crossword puzzles. Except one night when the roost shooters came through. They spooked the kangaroos in the paddock, and one of them jumped headfirst through our office window. So there's me, barefoot and half asleep, when this 6-tall kangaroo smashes through the glass window. Blood and glass everywhere. My dog starts chasing the kangaroo, I'm chasing my dog. And the kangaroo bounds around the office, knocking shit off desks in the dark, bleeding everywhere. I ran and opened the studio bay doors, and my dog chased it outside, where I'm assuming the poor thing, the kangaroo, was shot. Then I had to call my boss. Edit Bandit, the dog, was fine. She lived a long and healthy life, occasionally being bull-eyed by our pet cockatiel. Pet tax. Second pet tax. Number 4. Warning: medical gross stuff incoming. I worked in an emergency room. The worst night that comes to mind involves a patient that was bitten by a baby timber rattlesnake. He was bleeding out of every single orifice by the time he got to us. More blood than I'd ever seen before outside of a motorcycle v's 75 miles per hour headfirst to asphalt. I don't remember how many doses of Crofab we gave him, but it was the hospital's entire supply. But trying to get him stabilized, arranging the helicopter transport to a bigger and better equipped facility, all the blood, those weren't the worst parts. The worst part was when the patient lost control of his bowels. I will never, ever forget that smell. I spent the entire time standing by the door with a battery-powered fan and a handful of gauze pads saturated with cinnamon oil trying to reduce some of the smell. The doctor occasionally stuck her head out just so I could waft the cinnamon oil in her face. Yes, by some miracle, the patient did end up surviving, and as far as I know he made a full recovery. But the blood, the smell, and just the shock of it all. Yeah, never underestimate a baby timber rattlesnake. Number 3. It was 3 a.m. Popular Canadian coffee shop. There is one old baker in the back that rarely interacts with me past a dirty joke or a dirtier ditty from his Navy days. Other than that, I'm alone. Not another soul around the area, and I expect it to remain so for at least an hour yet. I'm boxing up the day old so the homeless shelter when I swear I see something out of the corner of my eye. It's behind me. I turn, then look down. There's a small child standing there. A native little toddler with a faw hawk staring at me intensely. I'm struck dumb with how absurd the situation is. How did he get behind the counter? I didn't hear the door open or see him come through the counter. I scan the storefront. No one. I yell for the baker in case he has a friend or something visiting that lost their kid. He comes over, and like me, does a double take at the kid and is baffled. Kid starts muttering incoherently. I get him a glass of water and a donut hole, and the baker runs out of the store to do a perimeter of the block. I call the non-emergency line and explain I have a little kid with no parents. I can't get any information from the boy, just mumbles I can't make out. Police arrive. Baker comes back, says that he can't find anyone else in the streets. The guy from the 24/7's corner store said he'll keep an eye out. Police try to speak to the kid and also get nothing but mutterings and half-hearted gestures. They take him away. I see them again for their morning coffee, and they told me the little guy walked several kilometers from the nearest reservation in the dead of night to my store. He had got into his parents' medicine cabinet and just walked out of the house. I'm floored. It must have taken that poor baby hours to get to me. Seeing him behind me like that in the dead of the night still shakes me. Spooked me more than the guy that threw a pot of coffee at me, the woman that tried to stab me with a plastic spoon because I refused to give her a metal one, and the dude that waited around for 4 hours hoping to catch me alone so he could teach me a lesson since I didn't have the flavor of bagel he wanted. Number 2. Worked as an evening manager at a major Hilton property. Got a complaint from a bunch of guests about the noise coming from one of the rooms. Turns out, a drunken man was beating the shit out of his wife and had the door barricaded so we couldn't get in. I called the cops, and they had to get into the room using the balcony from the next room over. I was still traumatized by what I saw when they finally arrested him and got the wife out of the room. She was covered in blood. It was horrifying. Number 1. Was an orderly in a hospital. 2 of us were sitting in the basement office adjacent to the morgue. A guy passed our office, looking at us a little shifty, came back again and asked if we had access to the morgue. We said, Des, thinking he was doing a pickup for a funeral home, but that seemed strange given it was around 12 o'clock, 12:30, and no, He wanted to pay us to let him in and leave him alone with the bodies for an hour. We escorted him up to security. Apparently, he had tried it in the past, as security knew him. Alright, folks, that's a wrap on our night shift horror stories. Thanks for hanging with us and diving into the spooky side of the night. Remember, if you've got your own bone-chilling tales, drop them in the comments below. We love a good scare. If you like more of this, please hit that thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay in the loop. See you in the next video.